Welcome to We Learn Virtual Learning Network. This is session number 28, reported speech of Let's Learn English. When we wish to convey what someone said or asked or instructed us to do, we use reported speech or indirect speech. Because this is not a direct conversation, we are trying to report what someone else said. In reporting statements, action words like said, told, replied, remarked, suggested, advised are used. Look at the example carefully. He said, inverted commas, I am not well, inverted commas, closed. Now this is direct statement, quoting what he said as he said it, without changing the pronoun or the verb. But when we want to convey this statement to someone else, how do we say that? While writing, it's all right. You can write within inverted commas and that becomes a quote, and it is understood that statement is as it was said by the speaker. So in written there is no problem when we want to convey what someone else said. But when we wish to say or when we wish to tell someone verbally, then what do? Now we can't say like that. He said inverted commas, I'm not well, inverted commas closed. No. We change the pattern. Some changes. What are those changes? Let's see. Now look at the indirect speech. Same sentence. He said that. Now that, as we know, is a conjunction. He said he was not well. To join these two sentences, we have used that. So, after he said, the conjunction that comes, he was not well. Now, I has to be changed to the pronoun, to the corresponding pronoun. Because if you say, he said that I was not well, the people might think that you are not well, but you want to convey that he was not well. So you have to use this pronoun he. That's why I changes into he. Now, I am not well is present tense. He said is past tense. So it is very clear that statement was said in the past. And when we are trying to convey this statement to someone using indirect speech, this has to change into past. So am becomes was. Other things do not change because they do not change in any tense. They remain same, whether present, past or future. So he said, I am not well becomes he said that he was not well. So it's very important to change the pronoun and the tense. He said is called reporting clause. And I am not well is called reported clause. What we have reported is I am not well, so that becomes reported clause. He said becomes reporting. Who is reporting? Who is saying? So these are, so that tenses in reporting clause and the reported clause must be same. Let's look at another example. Raj said to me, you can use my mobile. It's direct. Now I want to tell this to somebody else. Okay. So said to changes into told. So Raj told me that conjunction you. Now he was telling me. So you became I. It was in the past tense. Reporting clause is in the past tense. Raj said to me, it's past tense. So can also has to be changed into past tense and that becomes could. With the can, could, may, might, we always used first form of the verb. So I could use his mobile. That time Raj said you can use my mobile. That means Raj meant that I could use his mobile. So it becomes Raj told me that I could use his mobile. This is indirect speech. So remember, in reported speech, tenses and pronouns change in accordance with the main clause or the reporting clause. But practically speaking, very few people use correct reported speech. Sometimes it is also accepted, but that does not mean that it is correct. But you don't lose your fluency and you continue to speak. You can also report a sentence without changing all the pronouns and all the tenses, but few things important like changing I into he or she is very important. How to report questions? Okay, we'll first see how to report yes and no questions, that is confirmation questions. To report yes or no questions, if and whether is used in place of that. So in questions, we change the conjunction which joins two sentences, two clauses with if. Look at the example carefully. My father asked, inverted commas, are you going to office, inverted commas close, and a question mark. Now, while reporting this question to someone else, how we will say it in reported speech or indirect speech? My father asked if I was going to office. Firstly, you change into I because my father asked me. Father said you because he was talking to me at that time and I was in front of him, so he used you. But I am telling you that he told me, so I would use I. So my father asked if I was going to office. Do you see the difference between are you going to office and if I was going to office? Are you going to office is a proper question. The verb is in front. It starts with a helping verb. But I was going to office is not a question. It is a statement. Was, the helping verb, comes after the subject I. So this, remember, questions no longer remain questions. They become statements when we change them into reported speech or indirect speech. Why? Because it was a question when it was asked by the original speaker. That time it was a question. Now it is not a question. I'm just trying to tell you what he asked. I'm not asking you a question. So if I'm not asking a question, how can I write it or say it in question form? Please listen carefully and try to understand why a question changes into a statement while reporting it. Another example, I asked her, will you come to the class? Again, this is in the past tense. I asked her, the conjunction if, you will change into she, will would change into would. I asked her if she would come to the class, and as we used first form of the verb with will, shall, can, could, may, might, here also we will use come. So it becomes I asked her if she would come to the class. Remember, no question mark is put at the end of a question in reported speech. So here we have used only simple past tense, but whatever the tense, the reported clause should change according to the reporting clause or the main clause. In questions with do or does, these are omitted. Remember, while reporting questions, we do not use do or does. In place of these, we use if or whether. Because basically, questions that start with do or does are yes and no questions. So we saw in last examples, yes and no questions, we use the conjunction if and whether. So with do or does also, we use if and or whether. The only thing is, but we do not use do and does. We omit it. And how we do that? Let's see. Look at the example carefully. The teacher asked me, do you need a pen? Inverted commas closed and a question mark. Now it's a proper question. While reading, I can understand what the teacher asked you. But if I want to tell somebody about it verbally, how would I say it? Okay. The main clause, the teacher asked me. No changes up to here. No inverted commas. Conjunction if comes. Do you need a pen? Remember, this is simple present tense. When we want to say a statement in simple present tense, we don't use a helping verb. Do and does are helping verbs. We need them only to make questions. But if we are going to report a question and change it into a statement, we don't need do or does. So we would say, the teacher asked me if I needed a pen. It's a statement. It's not a question. And that's why there is no question mark at the end. So questions with do and does, we don't use do and does while reporting the question, and we change the question into a statement, and also we change the tense and pronouns accordingly. Let's look at one more example. He asked me, does your father work in a bank? Main clause or the reporting clause is in past tense. Does your father work in a bank is simple present tense. It's a question. Does is the helping verb, because in simple present tense, the helping verb used for making questions and negative is does. Does with singular, do with plural. So we have used does. Does your father work in a bank? So how do we change it into reported speech or indirect speech? He asked me. Inverted commas go. The conjunction if comes. Your becomes my. Because the person had asked me about my father, and I am trying to tell somebody about that. So the person asked me with the word your. But when I have to tell this to somebody else, I will use my. He asked me if my father worked. Does your father work in a bank is present tense, simple present tense. But we have to change it into past tense because the reporting clause he asked me is in past tense. So the past tense of work is worked in a bank. As I told you, these are other words and they don't change. Only pronouns and verbs change. So this is how we change do and does questions into reported speech. WH questions or information questions. For that, we don't use any conjunction. Neither that, nor if, nor whether. So, in reporting WH questions, that, if, or whether is not used. And again, question takes the form of a statement because it is no longer a question. It was a question when it was asked. Now it is a statement because I am not asking the person in front of me any question. I am trying to tell him what was asked of me. So, look at the example carefully. He asked me, "Where do you live?" He asked me, reporting clause, main clause, past tense. Where do you live? It is within inverted commas. It is direct speech. We have not used any conjunction, and that's why we have not changed the tense. We have reported it as it was asked because you can understand it is a quote. And remember, quotes don't change. We don't change tenses of quotes. So he asked me, "Where do you live?" The way it was asked. Okay, but now while reporting it, some changes will come. Obviously, he asked me, main clause, reporting clause, no changed. Where I mentioned earlier, in questions with do and does, we omit these. We leave these. So do goes, you becomes I, and live changes into past tense, that is lived. He asked me where I lived. He asked me what I did. He asked me why I went there. Simple statements. If it is present tense, simple present tense, statements in simple present tense. If it is past tense, sentences in simple past tense. Let's look at one more example. I asked him, inverted commas, "What do you want?" Inverted commas close. I asked him what he wanted. We changed. We omit do. Want becomes wanted because the reporting clause is in the past tense, and we make it a statement. It does not remain a question any longer. Let's see how do we report instructions. In report instructions, to or not to is used. Know that, if, whether, because reporting instructions we are asking someone to do something. So main verb is used, an action word is used, and with that action word we say to. He said to me, "Wait outside." He asked me to wait outside. Earlier in reporting clause we used said because it was said. But here we have changed this into asked. So in reporting instructions we change said to into asked or told or advised or ordered or requested, whatever the case may be. If it is a request, like he said to me, "Help me." He requested me to help him. Let's look at one more example. She told me, "Just hold my bag." So perhaps we can take this sentence as a request, and how would we change? She asked me to hold her bag. No problem, it's correct. But if you want to change it to request, that's also fine. She requested me to hold her bag. My changes into her. It's very simple to change instructions into reported speech. Just put to. And remember, with to we always use first form. How to report negative instructions? Instead of to, not to is used. He told me, don't wait for me. He asked me not to wait for him. To wait for him, not to wait for him. My mother said to me, don't drive fast. My mother told me not to drive fast. To drive slow or not to drive fast. My mother told me to drive slow. My mother told me not to drive fast. So please remember, reporting instructions we use to, and in reporting negative instructions we use not to. You may have heard people saying, oh, she asked me that don't trouble me. This is not the right way to report any instructions or a request. She told me not to disturb her, not to trouble her. That's all in today's session. Thank you. Happy learning with We Learning.